Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Instances of Native Americans being hassled and even detained by federal immigration agents continue to surface in Minneapolis and in places all over the country. The indiscriminate nature of the ICE crackdown is prompting actions by tribal officials, ranging from outright bans on ICE agents on reservations to guidelines for tribal citizens who come in contact with federal law enforcement officers. We'll explore the range of reactions by tribes coming up after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. Leaders of the North Slope village of Nuiqsut sued the U.S. Department of Interior last week for canceling a key subsistence protection for a development project. Ayolna Naidem for the Alaska Desk reports.
About a year ago, the U.S. Bureau of Land Management issued an agreement with Nuiqsut leaders that prohibited oil and gas development around Teshekpuk Lake, which is located in the northeastern corner of the Natural Petroleum Reserve, Alaska. The goal was to mitigate the harm that the ConocoPhillips Willow project would have on caribou, a crucial subsistence resource for Nuiqsut residents. But last month, the Department of the Interior, which oversees BLM, canceled that agreement, saying it was improperly issued in the first place. In turn, Nuiqsut's leadership filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, arguing that the cancellation was illegal.
We're fighting to protect the area and think about the caribou.
George Tukak-Silak is the president of Nuiqsut's Kupik Corporation. He says the cancellation was disappointing and damaged the trust of Nuiqsut residents.
By pulling that right away off, it's just like they're throwing us away. Not listening to the community.
Department of Interior officials declined to comment, citing the pending litigation. When BLM approved the controversial Willow project in 2023, one condition was mitigating the harm on Teshekpuk caribou herd. And BLM signed a right-of-way agreement with Nuiqsut to meet that condition. Silak says that Nuiqsut residents are careful when they consider development projects so close to their home. But the promise of additional protections for caribou helped more residents to get on board with Willow.
We will support development in our area as long as we kind of work together to balance, such as what we're doing here with a right-of-way.
But the Department of Interior said that the federal law does not authorize such conservation measures. The department indicated that they expect to hold lease sales this winter, which may include the area around Teshekpuk Lake. Nuiqsut leadership says they might consider legal avenues to protect the area, but no decision has been made yet. In Anchorage, I am Ayolna Naidem.
A bipartisan bill on Capitol Hill is looking to turn one of Arizona's federal monuments into the state's fourth national park behind Saguaro, the Petrified Forest, and the Grand Canyon. KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrazio has details.
Established in 1924 by President Calvin Coolidge, Chiricahua National Monument is known by many as the Wonderland of Rocks. From Geronimo to Cochise, this land is also steeped in Apache history, something the San Carlos Apache tribe and neighboring Mescalero Apache tribe in New Mexico want to see permanently protected. The effort is being led by Democratic U.S. Senators Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego, as well as Republican Representative Juan Ciscomani in the House. If passed, Arizona would tie fourth overall with Colorado, behind Utah, Alaska, and California for states with the most national parks. For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrazio.
California tribes are gathering this week for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Tribal Policy Summit. The annual summit, in its fourth year, is expected to draw tribal leaders, lawmakers, advocates, and victims' families. The theme is Justice, Healing, Sovereignty, and Solutions to MMIP. Two proposed pieces of legislation will be discussed: a bill to establish a Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Justice Program within the State Justice Department, and a bill to establish a tribal foster care prevention program to prevent Indigenous children from entering the child welfare system, which advocates say is a MMIP pathway. The event is taking place Tuesday and Wednesday at the Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, Sacramento. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The president of the Oglala Sioux Tribe banned immigration and customs enforcement officers from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. Red Lake Band of Ojibwe officials say ICE can't operate on their Minnesota reservation without prior approval. A number of tribes are waiving tribal ID fees and reaching out to secure their members' citizenship discounts. And dozens of tribes and Native organizations are offering guidance for Native Americans who encounter ICE agents. That's the response from tribes and Native organizations as more stories surface of Native citizens tangling and even being detained in the ICE crackdown and adjacent protests in Minneapolis and elsewhere. We'll hear more about how tribes are exercising sovereignty to protect their citizens or prepare for future requests or encroachment by federal immigration agencies. Listeners, as always, you are welcome to join this conversation. Ask a comment or a question by calling 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now is Frank Starr Comes Out. He is the president of the Oglala Sioux Tribe. President Starr Comes Out, hello, and welcome back to Native America Calling.
Oh, good morning. Good morning. Thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. Joining us from Cass Lake, Minnesota, we have Lenny Fineday. He is general counsel for the National Congress of American Indians, and he's a member of the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. Lenny, hello, and welcome to you as well.
Yeah, bonjour. I mean, Sean, thanks for having me today.
Bonjour, Lenny. And joining us from Boulder, Colorado, we have Beth Margaret Wright. She is a senior staff attorney with the Native American Rights Fund, and she is Laguna Pueblo. Beth, good morning, and welcome to Native America Calling.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Great to have all of you on the show today. President Starr Comes Out. I want to begin with you. There is still some confusion remaining over the whereabouts of 4 Oglala Sioux tribal members, your people. ICE officials say they are not holding and haven't even encountered Oglala citizens. Do you have any updates on these cases for us?
Unfortunately, I do not. That's kind of the word we got. So, you know, when we were informed that tribal members were being detained, we responded just like any other tribe would have. And so we started looking into it and calling around. But at the time, there was so much confusion. And I don't think there's really a process on how they were detaining these people and what kind of information was being gathered. So that's my concern. Why don't we have anything in place when they're just picking people up off the streets and questioning them? You know, we do have laws in place, but I strongly feel that process wasn't happening at the time.
And now a tribal proclamation bans ICE from your reservation. What prompted that action, President Starr Comes Out?
Yes. You know, as tribal nations, we're a federally recognized tribe, and we have we're a sovereign tribe, and so we exercise that authority because we feel that we don't need ICE or Border Patrol agents questioning our tribal membership. we are under the treaties. We are protected by the United States government, and how these agents are not recognizing tribal IDs and things like that. One of the things when I confronted some of the leadership of Interior, especially BIA, was our federal officers should be able to recognize our tribal IDs. One of the response from one of their officials was, well, they need to go get IDs. So my response is, we live in two different worlds when it comes to Native Americans. And it's not like we can just go walk up to DMV and ask for a tribal ID. A lot of our membership that live off the reservation have to travel back to their homelands and get an ID. And a lot of that, if you know our world, it's difficult for families to do that, especially if they're miles away from their homelands. So it's a difficult thing that we have to deal with, and as Native Americans, we always have barriers, and that's part of the barrier there. So we went to Minneapolis ourselves to show support to our tribal members, and it was great. It was a great turnout. We had other tribes there also issuing. They brought their people in, their enrollment people, and we spent 2 days there making tribal IDs for our membership who live in the Twin Cities.
President Stark comes out. Do you remember about how many Oglala Sioux tribal citizens attended that event and were able to acquire a tribal ID there in Minneapolis?
Well, we were kind of shooting from the hip because we did understand, that it was time sensitive. And so what I did as being the chairman of the Great Plains region, which is 17 tribes in and around the Great Plains, I met with some of the tribal leaders and let them know that we're securing a building there at the Indian Center in Minneapolis, and they're more than welcome to bring their people. I know it's short notice, but if they can, you're more than welcome to join us in this effort and to get to help our people out, to get them some kind of identification to protect themselves. Mm-hmm. And it was a great effort on a short notice. We had, I think, about 5 tribes there. The time we were there, there were tribes before us that went to the Indian Center before us and after we left. And it was a great turnout. I know the Oglala Sioux tribe, we did about 300 IDs approximately. Other tribes, I think Cheyenne River and Rosebud were also there during that time. And I think the Ojibwe and another nation was there. Mm-hmm. But I didn't get the data from them. But it was a good turnout. We had a lot of support. People were coming just to see our presence there. And my main focus was to protect our people, our employees at the Indian Center, to make sure that their safety was there, and so they can produce these IDs for the people. We did do a press release, our press conference that afternoon when we arrived that Friday, and we had a good turnout that day, and we were grateful for the people, the locals there, that were making sure their presence was around the building and just to show us some support. So it was great to see that. And our team, we took our own security, and we provided a security for them also. So it was a great turnout.
Now, some people listening to this show right now, they might be thinking, well, tribal ID, those are great, but for people who are living maybe in the Twin Cities, urban Native folks, maybe they have a state-issued ID as well. Are some of these folks maybe not able to get a state ID? Is that the value in having tribal ID and having you folks travel 8 hours from Pine Ridge to supply those?
Well, of course, we still have to follow that process of getting a tribal ID, so those members that didn't have documentation, I believe their names were collected to work with them later on. Once we returned home, we can start working and getting them the proper documents to secure an ID. So we really didn't have too much problems in that sense. I'm not sure with the other tribes if they encountered some issues, but just being up there showing support and letting the people know that hey, we hear you and we support you. So once we did this short response to our people, other concerns came up to maybe we can go to Denver and see if we can do something there for our folks. I know we can't travel and meet all our membership needs because we're a fairly big tribe and we have a lot of membership throughout the United States, but we're going to try and do our best to accommodate our locals around the surrounding states, our local membership.
President Frank Starr comes out with the Oglala Sioux Tribe, kicking off our conversation here today on Native America Calling. We're learning about a very successful tribal ID enrollment event that occurred in Minneapolis recently, and President Starr comes out, was there, along with other officials from the Oglala Sioux Tribe. Phone lines are open right now for listeners who would like to join us. If you have questions, if you have concerns with regard to recent ICE crackdowns and how they might impact you, how they might impact your tribal community, we have folks on the show right now who can provide answers to those questions. So the phone number, 1-800-996-2848 to join the conversation. Following President Donald Trump's executive order last year, informational signs about Native American history are starting to disappear from national parks around the country. They include parks at Death Valley and Little Bighorn. We'll explore what those signs say and what their removal means on the next Native America Calling.
Support by the American Indian College Fund. The American Indian College Fund provides millions of dollars of scholarships to thousands of Native students every year. Tribal citizens of every age and experience are eligible. The deadline for applications is May 31st, and you can find everything you need to apply at collegefund.org. That's collegefund.org or by phone at 800-766-FUND. Education is the answer.
Thank you for tuning in today to Native America Calling. We're talking about the Native American response to the ongoing ICE crackdown. Several tribes have issued advisories on individual rights. They're making sure citizens have tribal IDs, and at least one tribe, the Oglala Sioux Tribe, has banned ICE from their reservation. Has your tribe responded to ICE activity in any way, any formal declaration? Let us know. Join our conversation. We're at 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. We have Frank Starr comes out, president of the Oglala Sioux Tribe, on the line right now. And President Starr comes out. Do you expect this action, what we're all seeing in Minneapolis, do you expect that to spread to other places, maybe even to reservations, perhaps?
Yes, I believe that we need to bring awareness to Indian country nationwide. So I don't only speak for my tribe. I speak for other tribal nations as a whole too. You know, it's time we take a stand. It's time that we have a voice within this United States and the government. That's what I've been voicing during my time in office, and I believe we do a good job when we go to Washington to voice that. You know, but as far as the things that are happening right now on the ground, you know, the government needs to understand that we're the first peoples here, and we're the true owners of this land, and they need to understand that we have rights, and that's an insult to us when we get confronted like that, and what do we do about it? You know. What is the government doing about it? Seems to be the big talk now, circulating in Washington now. So I'm going to continue to uphold our treaty rights and the things that are owed to us. So.
And President Stark comes out, in addition to making sure folks have valid identification and some of these other precautions. What else can tribal nations do to protect their citizens? As you mentioned, the first people here, certainly not undocumented immigrants.
You know, I was just having this conversation with some of my staff here, and I say, wouldn't that be nice if, you know, the veterans were able to get their identity put on a driver's license. As you know, to identify them. Imagine if we can also do that as a tribal nation, put our tribal affiliation on the added to that driver's license to identify us as Native Americans. That'll cut a lot of red tape out, because a lot of tribes, or I should say, most of the tribes here, it's very difficult to make those things happen, to get a tribal ID if you're living off the reservation. And that seems to be a big problem within tribal nations and Indian country, is our folks that live off the reservation, who are making a living off the reservation. It's sometimes difficult for them to get tribal support when it comes to things like this. So it'll be great if we can do something about it and make that change. You know, it's very hard to acknowledge that to the rest of this the nation here, is that we live in two different worlds.
Right, and President Stark comes. I mean, that's a really interesting idea. I would be thrilled, just me individually, if I could have my tribal affiliation listed on my state driver's license. Yeah. Any thought in terms of what it might take with, like perhaps in South Dakota, any thought of what it might take to actually have that happen? What kind of legwork would have to be undertaken?
Well, first of all, we need to start voicing it, and I think that's probably one of the things that we'll be asking here. We'll be going to D.C. next week and voicing some of those concerns. And I think it needs to. Maybe we can do a bill. I don't know. But that'll definitely take away a lot of the red tape that when it comes to identifying Native Americans.
Absolutely.
And I think it needs to happen.
Yeah. President Stark comes out. Thank you for coming on the show today. I know you've got a busy day ahead of you, so appreciate you taking this time.
Yeah. So, and if I may, I'd just like to, let the people out there, stay strong, stay vigilant, know your rights and how to identify yourself, and let's stand together as one. Oka.
Oka. Thank you. President Frank Starr comes out from the Oglala Sioux tribe. 1-800-996-2848. That is the number to join this conversation. Again, 1-800-99-NATIVE. Let's bring Larry Fineday into the conversation now. He is General Counsel for the National Congress of American Indians, and he's a member of the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. And Lenny, NCAI is encouraging tribal citizens to update their IDs, offering guidance on what to do if detained, similar to what we heard from President Frank Starr comes out. What do we need to know as Native people right now when it comes to immigration crackdowns in Minneapolis and elsewhere? Any other precautions, any other issues we need to be especially mindful of?
Thanks, Sean. I'm glad to be here today, and I want to thank President Starr comes out for joining as well. It's always great to hear from our tribal leaders directly. Just in terms of the work that the National Congress of American Indians is doing, is we want to encourage all Native people, just like President Starr comes out said, to stand strong, stand together, remain vigilant, and as much as possible, avoid conflict, avoid confrontation. But of course, we've heard multiple reports of Native people encountering immigration and customs enforcement, as well as Customs and Border Patrol. And that's where it's so critical that Native people have proper identification on them. I know here in Minnesota, I've spoken with a number of tribal leaders, and as President Starr comes out alluded to, there have been numerous tribes who have gone down to the Minneapolis Twin Cities area to do print tribal identification cards. One of the things that I want to note is that tribal identification cards are actually already recognized by the federal government as a valid official government-issued photo identification, and it's recognized by the federal government for multiple purposes, and several of those purposes are already within the Department of Human Service or Department of Homeland Security. For example, we have the tribal IDs being accepted by TSA at the airports for boarding domestic flights. And also, one of the things that's important is for the U.S. Citizenship requirement for employment verification. The I-9 forms that we fill out, tribal identification cards are recognized there. And so it's disconcerting when we hear these reports that immigration officials are questioning the use of tribal identification cards, when in other areas that's dispositive proof of U.S. citizenship.
Right. And why do you think that is, Lenny? Why is it that these IDs that they're supposed to be able to accept, they're having problems taking them or don't want to take them?
I really believe, and it's speculation. Let me be clear on this part. I can't speak for DHS or what's going on in their agents' minds, but from what we're hearing, it really sounds like it's a lack of education and a lack of training on what tribal IDs are and what they actually represent when Native people encounter customs and immigration officials and present these IDs as valid identification. And so really, that's one of the things I know in our messaging at NCAI, that we have been consistent in getting to federal officials, federal decision makers, those within the administration and in Congress, to ensure that the administration upholds the responsibility for training of its officers, so that the officers are aware and know and understand what tribal identification is and how it is accepted under federal law.
Lenny, right now, a lot of Native folks, we're seeing what's happening in Minneapolis, and we're concerned. Some people are even traveling there to join protests. But, of course, a lot of folks are really worried about what if this moves on to tribal lands. And do you know at this point if Department of Homeland Security or ICE, have they reached out to any tribes to begin conducting immigration enforcement on reservations?
So I haven't heard any direct reports of DHS reaching out to tribes with regard to conducting immigration enforcement within tribal homelands. I have heard of some tribes taking preemptive action. The Red Lake Nation near me here in northern Minnesota is one of them that has taken preemptive action by their governing body, noting that DHS would require a judicial warrant before coming onto the reservation. I'm also aware of here on the Leech Lake Reservation of at least one tribal citizen who had an encounter with a Border Patrol agent. And when the Leech Lake Legal Department reached out to the Border Patrol, they denied having any direct interaction with tribal citizens, but stated we will be conducting operations in the near future near the reservation. And so that's the most that I've heard. And of course, being here in northern Minnesota, we are on the Leech Lake Reservation anyway, we're more than 100 miles away from the U.S.-Canadian border, but there are still other tribal communities like the Red Lake Nation, the Grand Portage Reservation, and the Bois Forte Reservation that are within that 100-mile radius that is usual for the Customs and Border Patrol agency to operate within. And so I haven't heard of any direct involvement yet, but I know that tribal government should be prepared for it. Tribal government should be directly requesting consultation with the Department of Human Services. I keep saying Department of Human Services. It's Department of Homeland Security, and developing those lines of communication as preemptively as possible.
Okay. And Lenny, what is the legal authority for tribes to possibly prohibit federal law enforcement officers on a Native American reservation or trust land, perhaps?
Yes, it's limited.
Okay.
Generally speaking, the federal government has the ability to enforce federal law across the United States, including within Indian country and tribal lands. And I say that as a general proposition. There are exceptions to that rule that may be to a specific tribe's treaty. If a specific tribe has specific treaty provisions regarding who can enter and who can't enter and for what purposes. There may also be some statutory provisions. There may be certain items that are specific to individual tribe. And so, but just as a general principle, federal officials do have the authority to enforce federal law across the United States, including within Indian country. Now, with that being said, it's important to note that both the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Agency and the Customs and Border Patrol are limited in scope of their jurisdiction, and they're limited to enforcing federal immigration law. They are not general law enforcement officers. They do not exercise general police power. They are limited to only immigration enforcement, and that enforcement necessarily cannot extend to United States citizens. And so that's the tension we find ourselves in.
Thanks, Lenny. Let's go to the phones. We have Regina, who's listening on Keeley Radio in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Good morning, Regina. You're on the air.
Good morning. Thanks a lot. We're indigenous people. You look at Alaska all the way to the tip of South America and all the islands, Pacific Islands, including Cuba and Australia. I mean, that was all indigenous land. When we're doing something here, we can reach out to all indigenous countries to stand up with us, because they're suffering the same things we're suffering here. They came to this country, and there's mega massacre sites. Some of their own people don't even understand that we're still alive because we're not in the history book. And that was deliberate. They wanted to get rid of us. But we're still indigenous, and there's still the visitors, and there's a heck of a lot of indigenous people around the world.
Mm. Regina, what are you concerned about with regard to ICE? Do you travel? Do you have relatives who travel or maybe live in Minneapolis or other urban areas? And if so, what are they telling you? All right. Looks like we lost Regina there, but appreciate her joining us from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, talking about the importance of Native peoples, indigenous peoples, thinking of ourselves as a collective group, as collective entities. 1-800-99-NATIVE. That is the number. If you would also like to join this conversation, we've got our phone lines open. And producers are standing by waiting for your call. You just pick up your phone, call 1-800-99-NATIVE, and that'll connect you directly to the studio. And let's get some more calls going. I'd like to hear from some other listeners as well. Maybe you're in the Twin Cities or you're in another urban area and you have concerns with ICE tactics, or maybe you've experienced ICE yourself. Maybe you've had an encounter or you've had some sort of issue at some point over the last few months or even in the past with regard to immigration. We'd sure like to hear your thoughts, your perspective, and join the conversation. Again, that number, 1-800-996-2848. We're going to take another short break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk more with our guests on the show today. We have Lenny Fine-Day with the National Congress of American Indians, and we also have Beth Margaret Wright, who is a senior staff attorney with the Native American Rights Fund. And we'll hear from Beth on the other side of this break, so stay with us.
Support for law and justice-related programming provided by Hobbs, Strauss, Dean & Walker, LLP, a national law firm dedicated to promoting and defending tribal rights for over 40 years. More information available at hobbsstrauss.com.
Kaufman & Associates is a Native-owned and led consulting firm, supporting Native communities with culturally grounded solutions to shape Indigenous futures. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
We're glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce, and we're talking about the rights of tribes and tribal citizens in light of current aggressive immigration crackdowns. If you have questions or you have comments, still plenty of time. You can join this conversation. Just call 1-800-996-2848. That is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Our next guest, Beth Margaret Wright, is a senior staff attorney with the Native American Rights Fund, and she joins us now from Boulder, Colorado. And Beth, again, I just keep thinking about Native people all over the United States, living in urban areas. So many of us, as was mentioned earlier on the show, now live off reservations in urban areas. And if we are confronted, if we are questioned, or even if we are perhaps detained by ICE, what do we need to keep in mind? What else do we need to understand here?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think it depends on the type of encounter with ICE that individuals have, but as far as just general tips for any encounter with ICE, we're advising folks on a couple things. The first thing to remember is that you always have the right to remain silent. This means that you don't have to answer any questions an ICE officer asks you. You don't have to answer where you were born, any immigration status of your family members or friends, or where you're from. We're also recommending that folks do not lie to ICE if they choose to talk to an ICE agent, because lying may impact folks in the future. We're advising folks to not physically resist or obstruct ICE officers, because that may also subject folks to some sort of criminal prosecution or penalties in the future. And we're advising folks to carry identification on them including, as my colleagues mentioned, tribal-issued IDs or state-issued IDs. And we're also reminding Native folks that if you are a United States citizen, there's no law that requires you to carry proof of U.S. citizenship on you while you're in the United States, but sometimes you may have to have identification on you. And as my colleagues mentioned, a tribal ID is a valid form of identification here in the United States.
Okay, thanks, Beth. This is really helpful. Now, you mentioned perhaps remaining silent. Can you give me an example of a situation when a person might be best off just being quiet, not saying anything? Because I'm thinking of myself. If I was questioned, I would probably be just very inclined to say, hey, look, my name is Sean, and I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a tribal citizen. I don't think I'd want to stay quiet unless maybe I was hiding something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends on the situation. We are advising folks that if you are a United States citizen and if you're detained by an ICE agent, that you specifically say, I am a United States citizen, and provide some sort of identification. But an example of where you might want to stay silent is if an ICE agent comes to your home or your work and they're asking about someone else, a colleague, a family member who may have maybe in the United States unlawfully. And if ICE is asking, where is so-and-so? Do you know so-and-so? You absolutely have the right to remain silent. And if you choose to remain silent, you can explicitly say, I'm invoking my right to remain silent.
Okay. All right. That's helpful, Beth. Now, you mentioned ICE perhaps coming over to someone's house. Now, what can they do? I mean, can they come into my house if they want? If I work at an office, can they come to my place of employment, or can they come into a business? Can they come into a school? How far can they go?
Yeah, a couple of things to that. The first thing is that ICE can enter public spaces generally without any kind of warrant. So when we think of a public space, we think of a lobby of a workplace, we think of a dining area of a restaurant. But the other thing there is that ICE cannot enter private places without a valid judicial warrant or without permission. So we're advising folks that if ICE wants to enter your home or wants to enter the public or the private place at your work, that you do not let them enter unless you give them permission or unless they present a valid judicial warrant.
What about children? Let's say a parent has a child being questioned by immigration agents. What do they need to do? And are we seeing that to any great extent, children being hassled by ICE?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to remember is that children have the same protections as adults. So children can exercise the right to remain silent. They don't have to answer any questions. But another thing to remember is they're not legally required to carry identification unless they're operating a vehicle, but they can carry a tribal ID, a copy of their passport, or a birth certificate to prove identification. So we're just reminding folks to know your rights, and that if you're a child, you have the same rights as an adult.
Does any of this stuff impact like a person's criminal record? Let's say someone is detained by ICE, maybe for an extended period of time, like half a day, 6-7 hours, like we've heard about with some folks. Can any of that information find its way onto a criminal record?
It depends. As my colleagues mentioned, ICE typically only has jurisdiction to enforce the immigration laws of the United States. So when it comes to United States citizens, ICE typically does not have jurisdiction. ICE has some limited authority to make arrests for some certain crimes, but generally, as a general principle, ICE does not have jurisdiction regarding United States citizens.
Okay. And again, this whole issue of being detained, I mean, we are seeing situations where Native people with no criminal records, holding proper ID, being forcefully detained by ICE. It happened to a Red Lake Ojibwe descendant who is now facing federal criminal charges for allegedly assaulting an officer. Beth, what are some of the issues NARF is hearing with regard to these types of events? And again, how do people protect themselves? Again, now here's somebody facing criminal charges because of an altercation, allegedly.
Yeah, we're hearing those same reports. We're advising folks that if you're detained, to stay calm, explicitly state that you are a United States citizen, show a form of identification, exercise your right to remain silent, do not say anything until you consult with a lawyer. And we're also advising folks to document, record as safely as possible any interaction that they have with ICE, and then reach out to consult with a lawyer after any interaction such as that.
And what if you can't afford a lawyer? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, the Native American Rights Fund offers pro bono legal services to folks who have encounters with ICE, and there are also public defenders out there who represent clients pro bono.
Thank you, Beth. Larry Fine with the National Congress of American Indians. I want to go back to you because NCAI is going to meet soon. Its executive winter session. Is there anything in the works right now to address the current situation around the country when it comes to these immigration crackdowns?
Yeah, as I said earlier, at NCAI, we have a long-standing position with regard to federal agencies engaging in tribal consultation, even specifically as it relates to the Department of Homeland Security, which, by the way, is the newest cabinet-level federal agency established in 2002. And if you go back to 2008 is when NCAI first had the first NCAI resolution regarding tribal consultation, and there have been several since then. Noting the Department of Homeland Security's obligation to communicate, develop relationship and communication protocols between the agencies and tribal governments. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that necessarily happening for sure on a free, prior, and informed consent basis. The Department of Homeland Security does have a tribal consultation policy that their latest iteration has been in place since 2023. It draws heavily on Executive Order 13175 with regard to federal agencies consulting with tribal governments. That's been in place. That executive order has been in place since November of 2000, so for about a little over 25 years now. So as NCAI is preparing to meet next week, I do know that in conversations I've had with tribal leaders and leadership at NCAI is there's a strong desire to re-engage DHS on that obligation to consult with tribal nations. Again, develop that relationship, develop that direct line of communication so that when tribal leaders have questions or concerns or their tribal citizens are encountering immigration officials, that tribal governments have a direct pipeline and they know who to contact. They have a pre-existing relationship in place with the department and with the agency to ensure that there's swift, timely, and prompt communication that's taking place so that issues can be resolved as quickly as possible.
Lenny, so much focus still right now in Minneapolis, but what are you hearing from other NCAI member tribes, hundreds across the country that you folks represent? Are there concerns elsewhere in other parts of the country for possible immigration crackdowns? And if so, what are tribes doing? What are they telling you? How are they preparing?
Yeah, for sure. As I've mentioned, there are tribes that are taking preemptive action. I think you've mentioned two of them, the Oglala Lakota Nation and the Red Lake Nation. One of the things that I think is important as we sort of take a step back and look at things from a national perspective is some of the tribes that are on the borders, like the Tono O'odham Nation in Arizona, or as I previously mentioned, the Grand Portage Reservation here in Minnesota, they have long-standing interactions, particularly with Customs and Border Patrol, primarily because their tribal homelands are directly on an international border, and their tribal homelands have federal ports of entry into the United States. And so for those communities and those tribal areas, like they have been engaged or attempting to be engaged with the Department of Homeland Security for some time. And in that regard, I want to make sure that everybody is aware that tribes all across the country are all about public safety and law enforcement and ensuring that our tribal communities are strong, that our tribal communities are protected, and that our tribal communities are safe, first and foremost for our tribal citizens. And that's something that has been a long-standing priority of tribal governments as they interact with the federal government, not just the Department of Homeland Security, but of course the Department of Interior and the Department of Justice as well. And so I think that when you take all of those things together, there is this concern about the lack of consultation and direct communication that's taking place right now. And what I'm hearing from tribal leaders is a strong desire to bridge that gap and really develop that communication so there can be understanding and dialogue that's taking place on both sides of DHS and tribal governments.
Thank you, Lenny. We have time for one more caller. This is Sarah, who is listening on KUNM Radio in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hello, Sarah. Thanks for joining the show. You are on the air.
Thank you, Sean. I'm learning so much from the show, and I just wanted to comment that it's really upsetting to see how ICE is behaving. And here in New Mexico, they're hassling Pueblo members and questioning their citizenship, which is awful. But I was also heartened last night on the Grammys to hear a singer quote Native American activists from the stage and say that no one is illegal on stolen land. And that was just exciting to see the solidarity and people lifting up Native voices.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Sarah, my wife called me into the living room. I wasn't watching, but she was watching, and she was pretty fired up when she heard that as well. Yeah, nobody's illegal on stolen land. Appreciate you calling in, Sarah. Very much so.
Yeah, it was great to see that lifted. Thank you.
Absolutely. Beth Margaret Wright, we got about a minute here before we have to wrap up this conversation. But what are your thoughts with that? Nobody's illegal on stolen land. Because sometimes I hear that and I think, yeah, maybe. But you could also say everyone, nobody's illegal, or maybe everyone's illegal on stolen land. I don't know. What's your thought?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I think, Native people are no strangers to violent interactions with the federal government, and so we're just advising Native folks to stay calm and know your rights and look out for each other.
All right, appreciate it very much. And with that, we're going to begin to wind down this show today here on Native America Calling. But as always, just because the conversation ends doesn't mean the dialogue has to end as well. So feel free to go to our website, nativeamericacalling.com. You can comment on there, or you can go to any of our social media platforms and you can post as well. Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads. We have all of those platforms available for our listeners and for our audience to engage with us. So please use those platforms, use those tools. Again, this is a community here, Native America Calling. This is a forum in which we have guests, but we also have listeners, and some folks like to call the show. Some folks would rather just kind of be on the sidelines, but please engage with us. Keep this dialogue going. And again, it's all about collective consciousness for Native people. So, as always, we really appreciate the guests who joined the show today. We had Oglala Sioux Tribal President Frank Starr comes out. We had Lenny Feinday on the show, and we also had Beth Margaret Wright. And for our two callers, thank you as well for joining this conversation. And with that, we're going to wrap up. I am your host, Sean Spruce. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll be back again tomorrow, same place, same time. So please tune in again.
The faculty of tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, cheer progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate healing.
Who protects Indian country? Amerind does. As the only 100% tribally owned insurance carrier, Amerind helps strengthen tribal communities by providing reliable insurance coverage and keeping dollars in Indian country. From property and liability to commercial auto and tribal workers' compensation, Amerind is here to protect what matters. Celebrating 40 years of serving Indian country. Learn more at amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.